The heavy oak doors of the Busan penthouse slammed shut. Then everything went silent, too silent. I had been on my knees scrubbing the marble floor when I heard my husband's voice explode from upstairs. Where is he? The sponge slipped from my hand. I looked beside me. The small toy truck Zion had been playing with was still there. My 4-year-old son wasn't. Hi, welcome to this channel. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, and welcome back to Afro-Korean Stories by Kay. If you love intense, heart-stopping romance and drama, you won't want to miss how this ends. Zion! I hissed, my voice barely a whisper. I scrambled to my feet, a cold chill washing over me. I was just a temporary contract cleaner trying to survive in Busan, explicitly warned to stay out of the East Wing. That was his domain. Tae-jin, the boss of the most ruthless syndicate in the city. And my son had just wandered right into it. I sprinted down the dimly lit corridor, my cheap sneakers squeaking against the polished wood. I rounded the corner to the private study and stopped dead. Tae-jin, the monster of Busan, was sprawled face down on the Persian rug. His massive frame was convulsing violently, drenched in sweat. His fearsome bodyguards were nowhere in sight. They had locked down the perimeter, sealing him inside, sealing us inside. And right beside him, kneeling on the floor, was Zion. Zion, get away from him. I screamed, lunging forward. Before I could reach him, Tae-jin's arm shot out. His massive, tattooed hand clamped around Zion's tiny wrist. With terrifying speed, Tae-jin rolled over. His eyes were entirely out of focus, filled with a feverish, volatile paranoia. He didn't raise a fist, but the sheer menace in his glare stopped my heart in my chest. Who sent you? Tae-jin choked out, coughing harshly. Bae, was it Bae? Please. I dropped to my knees, throwing my hands in the air. I'm just the cleaner. Let my son go. Please, he's just a baby. Tae-jin's chest heaved. His grip trembled. The legendary boss was fading right in front of me. Zion didn't cry. He didn't pull away. Instead, he reached out with his free hand and gently placed it on Tae-jin's burning forehead. You're really hot, Zion whispered, his innocent voice cutting through the terrifying tension. Mommy says sick people shouldn't be left alone. Tae-jin froze. The absolute shock on his face was undeniable. The lethal syndicate boss, a man who commanded obedience with a single look, stared at my son as if the rules of the world had just shattered. The tension in his broad shoulders vanished. His arms slowly dropped, his hand hitting the floor with a dull thud. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed completely, his grip on Zion's wrist going slack. I grabbed Zion, yanking him into my chest, ready to run. But before I could turn, the study doors burst open. Lieutenant Bae, Tae-jin's second-in-command, stood in the doorway. His cold eyes darted from the unconscious boss to me. He's gone, Bae said, his voice eerily calm. Not a question, a statement. And as he stepped fully into the room, he locked the heavy wooden door behind him, trapping us inside with a terrifying smile. You're not going to scream, Bae whispered, his polished shoes silent against the Persian rug as he advanced. You're a ghost, Loretta, a temporary cleaner. No one even knows you're in this wing. I backed away, pulling Zion tightly against my chest. My mind raced. Bae wasn't looking at Tae-jin with panic. He was looking at him with victory. Call a doctor. I yelled, though my voice shook. He's still breathing. He needs help. Bae chuckled, a dry, hollow sound that made my skin crawl. A doctor won't fix what ails our boss. His time has simply expired. It's a tragedy that you and your boy interrupted his final moments. He was going to get rid of us, not with force, but by making us disappear in the chaos of a syndicate transition. I scanned the room, desperate. My eyes landed on the heavy wooden desk. A delicate porcelain teacup sat there. A strange, chalky white residue clinging to the rim. It was exactly the same color as the dust I'd just wiped off Bay's expensive shoes in the hallway. "It was you," I breathed out. "You poisoned him." Bay stopped dead in his tracks. The terrifying smile vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating glare. "You gave him something in the tea," I said, my voice growing louder, fueled by sheer, frantic motherly instinct. "If you touch my son, I will scream. The men outside think he's sick. What happens when I tell them his own second-in-command poisoned him like a coward? They wouldn't believe a cleaner." Bay hissed, taking a menacing step closer, his hands curling into tight fists. "They will when they see the cup." I snapped back. The standoff hung in the stifling air of the room. Bay glared at me, calculating the risk. The silence was agonizing, heavy enough to crush my lungs. I braced myself for him to lunge. Suddenly, a massive hand shot out from the floor, gripping Bay's ankle with bone-crushing force. Bay gasped, stumbling backward. Tae-jin was awake. His eyes were half-closed, his breathing ragged, but his grip was iron. He dragged himself up on one elbow, staring daggers into Bay. "Get out!" Tae-jin snarled. The voice was weak, but the authority behind it was absolute. "Sir," Bay started, his face pale with sudden panic. "I said get out." Tae-jin roared, the sheer force of his will masking his fading strength. "And if you ever lock a door in my house again, I will end you." Bay hesitated, his eyes darting between the cup on the desk and Tae-jin's furious gaze. Knowing he was outplayed for now, Bay gave a stiff, jerky bow, unlocked the heavy doors, and slipped out, leaving the threat hanging heavily in the air. We were alone again, just me, my 4-year-old, and the most dangerous man in Busan, who was rapidly losing consciousness again. I tried to inch toward the open door, desperate to escape. "Don't!" Tae-jin rasped, his hand reaching out blindly before falling back to the floor. "Don't go." "You're right. It burns." Zion wiggled out of my grip. Before I could stop him, my son ran to the nearby mini-fridge, grabbed a cold bottle of water, and brought it to the terrifying syndicate boss. "Drink this," Zion said firmly. "You have to stay hydrated." Tae-jin stared at my tiny son, completely disarmed by the pure, transactional free care. He looked up at me, his terrifying facade entirely stripped away. "Why aren't you running?" "Because my son just gave you an order," I said, my voice trembling but defiant. "And right now, I need you alive just as much as you need me." I snatched the water bottle from Zion's hand and forced it against Tae-jin's cracked lips. "Drink," I commanded, my voice sharper than I felt. Tae-jin swallowed greedily, his massive chest heaving as the cold water hit his system. The fever was still burning him alive, but his eyes were sharper now. He stared at me, searching my face for an ounce of fear or pity. I gave him neither. "Why are you doing this?" Tae-jin choked out, wiping his mouth with the back of his tattooed hand. "You know who I am. You know what I do." "I know you're a man whose best friend just tried to end his life," I snapped, pulling Zion securely against my side. "And I know that if you don't get up right now, Bay is going to come back through those doors, and my son and I will become loose ends." Tae-jin grunted, using the heavy mahogany desk to pull his towering frame off the floor. His breathing was ragged, but the sheer force of his presence was returning. He reached for the ornate landline on his desk and punched in a 2-digit code. Silence. Dead air. Tae-jin's face darkened, a terrifying shadow falling over his sharp features. He cut the lines. The entire East Wing communications are completely severed. "Then we walk out," I said, my heart pounding violently against my ribs. "Your men are right outside the perimeter. You're the boss. Give them an order." I turned toward the heavy oak doors, but Tae-jin's massive hand clamped onto my shoulder, stopping me cold. "Look at the security monitor," he whispered, pointing a shaking finger at the screen embedded in his wall. I stepped closer, my breath catching in my throat. The feed showed the hallway outside. It was lined with guards, standing shoulder to shoulder. But they weren't wearing the signature gray suits of Tae-jin's loyal crew. They were dressed in absolute black. "Those aren't my men," Tae-jin breathed out, the devastating realization cracking his stoic facade. "They didn't just poison me. He swapped the detail, while the fever distracted me. If we open that door, Loretta, we belong to him." A suffocating panic gripped my throat. We were entirely boxed in. I looked down at Zion, who was clinging to my pant leg, his big, innocent eyes darting between me and the giant man beside us. "Then what do we do?" I asked, my voice cracking with pure desperation. "I am not letting my son become a casualty of your broken empire." Tae-jin looked at Zion, a profound, uncharacteristic softness flashing across his brutal features. It was as if 15 years of ruling through fear had just dissolved at the sight of a 4-year-old boy who simply wanted him to feel better. "You aren't going to be a casualty," Tae-jin said, his voice dropping to a low, fierce vow. "For a decade and a half, I thought fear meant loyalty. Bae just proved me wrong. But your boy, he showed me what real care looks like. I am going to get you both out of here." Before I could process his words, a heavy, rhythmic pounding echoed against the oak doors. It wasn't a knock. It was a demand. "Tae-jin," Bae's voice slithered through the heavy wood, dripping with venom. "It's time to sign the transition papers. Open up, or we take the door off its hinges." The pounding on the heavy oak doors grew louder, the thick wood groaning under the immense pressure. They were going to break it down. "Get behind me," Tae-jin ordered, his voice suddenly stripped of its feverish weakness. He stood tall, towering and immovable, shielding us completely. He didn't brace for an attack. He didn't look for a way to fight. Instead, he walked calmly to the door, grabbed the brass handle, and pulled it wide open. Bae stood in the hallway, a smug, arrogant smirk twisting his features. He held a thick leather folder. Behind him, a dozen men in pitch-black suits stood in absolute, terrifying silence, their eyes fixed on the man they were about to dethrone. "Sign the transition papers." Tae-jin, Bae sneered, stepping past him into the study. "You can hand it over quietly, or we can make this incredibly traumatic for the cleaner and her precious boy." Bae slid the folder onto the mahogany desk. He braced his shoulders. He expected a roar. He expected a desperate, furious final stand from the most feared man in Busan. He wanted Tae-jin to beg or threaten, to prove that his empire was worth dying for. Instead, Tae-jin reached out and picked up his heavy gold fountain pen. The silence in the room was absolute. No shouts, no sudden movements, just the suffocating, unbearable weight of the moment. "You think this piece of paper gives you power?" Tae-jin asked, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that echoed off the walls. He didn't look at the paper. He looked dead into Bae's eyes. "You spent 15 years studying how I used fear. You learned absolutely nothing about real strength." Without breaking eye contact, Tae-jin signed his name across the bottom line. He relinquished the entire Busan syndicate, his fortune, and his throne in a single fluid motion. He dropped the pen. It clattered loudly against the polished wood. Bae stared at the signature, his arrogant smirk melting into profound confusion. The victory was suddenly hollow. The men in the hallway shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting from Bae's cowardly, deceitful triumph to Tae-jin's unyielding dominance. They realized in that instant that Bae hadn't conquered a king. He had poisoned a sick man while hiding behind a desk. "The empire is yours, Bae. It's a prison of paranoia, and you just locked yourself inside," Tae-jin said coldly. He turned his back on his former life and extended his massive hand toward me. "Come, Loretta, we are leaving." I grabbed Zion's hand and stepped forward, my heart pounding in my throat. Bae opened his mouth to give a command, to to stop us, to assert his new authority, but the words died in his throat. His men didn't block our path. They parted like the Red Sea. They followed pure authority. And right now, all the true power was radiating from the man walking away with nothing but his life. We walked out of the estate and into the cool evening air. The oppressive weight of the syndicate vanished behind us in the shadows. Zion tugged on Tae-jin's sleeve as we reached the quiet street. "Are you still sick, mister?" Tae-jin stopped. He looked down at my tiny son, and then over at me, a genuine, quiet smile, the very first I had ever seen, broke across his hardened face, erasing years of cruelty. "No," Tae-jin whispered softly, placing a gentle hand on Zion's shoulder. "I am finally cured. They say fear builds the strongest walls, but it only takes one spark of kindness to burn them down and show you the open sky." If you loved this emotional journey of survival, sacrifice, and redemption, make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment about your favorite moment, and subscribe for more thrilling Afro-Korean stories by Kay. See you in the next one.